Not all fairy tales end the way we expect. And even in Hollywood, some stories come with a cost that fame can never erase. Michael J. Fox is known as the smiling face of optimism, a symbol of speed, charm, and limitless vitality. But behind that picture is a life formed by pressure, silence, and an illness that began stealing from him long before the world noticed. This is hardly a tale of total loss. It's about gradually losing everything while remaining in the spotlight. A dream founded on hunger and terror. Long before Michael J. Fox became a household name, his dream nearly collapsed under the weight of poverty and loneliness. He took the foolish decision to drop out of high school in Canada and travel to the United States. He was certain that acting was his sole option and not merely a passion. What came next was survival mode rather than an immediate opportunity. Fox subsisted on cooked macaroni, leftover fast food, and whatever he could find or afford while living alone in a dirty little Hollywood apartment. At his lowest point, he admitted to foraging through trash for sustenance, something he would later recount without hyperbole or self-pity. Just fact. Money was so scarce that Fox resorted to selling furniture he didn't truly possess. Items rented under phony identities, aiming to remain one step ahead of landlords and unpaid payments. He just couldn't afford the comforts of rent and taxes. Every day turned into an exercise in avoidance, avoiding starvation, avoiding eviction, and avoiding the depressing realization that leaving home too soon might have ruined his life. And yet, despite the urgency, he refused to quit. He believed almost unreasonably that something would change. That belief paid off when he earned family ties, a job that arrived just as he was prepared to quit up and return to Canada. The struggling actor suddenly rose to prominence on television, but the timing came at a cost few people ever witnessed. Fox was cast in Back to the Future almost immediately, subjecting him to a rigorous schedule that would push his physical and mental boundaries. For months, he worked over 20 hours a day, filming television by day, shooting film through the night, sleeping in pieces, barely functioning on tiredness and adrenaline. What should have been the happiest occasion of his life was instead a trial by fire. Success arrived so fast that Fox had no time to comprehend it, no time to rest, and no time to prepare for what it would demand from him. His notoriety was based on terror rather than comfort. Fear that if he slowed down, everything would leave as swiftly as it arrived. The diagnosis that hushed everything. In the early 90s, Michael J. Fox was riding a wave few performers ever experience. He was young, worldwide famous, recently married, and still being offered roles that supported the image the audience liked. Fast, confident, unstoppable. Then, after a night of drinking, he observed something he couldn't put his finger on one calm morning. A twitch on his pinky finger. It was little, almost ridiculous, the kind of thing most people would ignore. Fox didn't. Something about it felt odd, insistent, out of place in a body that had always obeyed him. Doctors verified what no rising celebrity expects to hear before reaching 30. Fox was told he had Parkinson's disease, incurable, progressive, and guaranteed to get worse. The diagnosis didn't simply imperil his job, it changed his notion of time. Doctors warned him that within a decade he might no longer be able to act. For someone whose entire identity was built on movement, time, and verbal perfection, the words landed like a gradual explosion. Fox subsequently stated that standing on the street afterward, he felt his world crumble inward. Fame suddenly felt transactional, as if success had commanded a price he hadn't known he was consenting to pay. What followed wasn't acceptance, but denial. Lengthy, rigorous, and draining. For 7 years, Fox told almost no one. He kept working, kept smiling, and kept his terror covered behind controlled performances and properly scheduled drugs. While filming Doc Hollywood, he began depending heavily on dopamine-based medicines to reduce tremors, not for comfort, but for concealment. His purpose wasn't relief, it was invisibility. He became an adept at timing drugs to appear steady on set, even as his body quietly betrayed him between shots. But silence has consequences. The strain of masking Parkinson's took an emotional toll that Fox never fully acknowledged at the time. He drank to silence the feelings he refused to face, telling himself he could flee both addiction and disease. Publicly, nothing seemed wrong. Privately, everything was unraveling. The sickness wasn't simply harming his body, it was isolating him. Parkinson's had entered his life without consent, and Fox replied, the only way he knew how at the moment, by pretending it wasn't there. That facade ultimately collapsed when paparazzi began noting his activities, shouting invasive questions outside his home, turning suspicion into spectacle. Fox came to the conclusion that his family was no longer being protected by his secret. They were suffering from it. Going public with his diagnosis wasn't an act of courage at first. It was an act of necessity, and there was no escaping what followed once the truth was out. The gradual, inexorable course of an illness that would question every assumption he had about control, identity, and endurance. Addiction, collapse, and the moment he couldn't hide from himself. As Parkinson slowly tightened its grip, Michael J. Fox began fighting a second struggle. One he chose, even as it consumed him. He told himself he could regulate alcohol, so it became his haven. Drinking soothed the worry of an uncertain future and softened the continual calculation required to disguise his symptoms. On set, he relied on dopamine medication to settle his hands. He used booze as an offset to calm his thoughts. The two blurred into a perilous pattern that helped him operate publicly while unraveling inwardly. The expense became unavoidable at home. Fox subsequently revealed that some of his earliest recollections with his son were saturated in beer cans and absence, a period he would cruelly label Miller time. What concerned him most wasn't the drinking itself, but how normal it had grown to feel. Addiction didn't start off as anarchy. It showed up as maintenance. He persuaded himself that he was still there, still working, still supplying. But the truth was simpler and tougher. He was slipping inside his own existence. There was no drama, no speeches, and no witnesses at the pivotal moment. One night, Fox passed out on the couch, a beer dropping onto the carpet as his body fell still. It was his wife, Tracy Pollan, who found him like that. She didn't shout or threaten. She didn't need to. The image was enough. In that moment, Fox saw himself the way he had been avoiding, helpless, reckless, and no longer in control. For the first time, dread triumphed over denial. But sobriety did not provide relief. Afterwards, Fox characterized it as a vicious internal struggle, deprived of the numbing retreat he had depended on. He had no protection against Parkinson's disease if he didn't drink. The questions he had suppressed surfaced all at once. How fast would it progress? How much would he lose? Who would he be when acting was no longer possible? These thoughts didn't dissipate with clarity. They sharpened. He remained sober, though. Not because it was simple, but because it was honest. Recovery forced Fox to confront the disease without anesthesia, to experience anxiety without diversion, and to lean fully on the people around him. Tracy's constancy became his anchor, not as a babysitter, but as someone who refused to let him depart peacefully. He had been almost destroyed by addiction. Even though it was hard, it was the first time he made the decision to confront, rather than avoid what was going on. Success. After the punishment and the cost of staying against every prediction he had been told, Michael J.F.O.X. did not fade away following his diagnosis. Instead, he entered one of the most productive and renowned eras of his career. When he took the lead part in Spin City, Fox proved that Parkinson's had not robbed his timing, his intelligence, or his presence. Playing a fast-talking deputy mayor demanded precision and stamina, and Fox achieved both, garnering significant honors and reinforcing his place in television at a time when many expected him to disappear. But the success came with terms. Behind the scenes, Fox was carefully controlling symptoms, organizing his days around medication schedules, and making quiet tweaks to disguise what the audience wasn't meant to see. Eventually, the truth reached the people closest to him. During the show's run, Fox acknowledged his condition to the actors, not as an announcement, but as a need. By the fourth season, he acknowledged what he had been resisting. The pace was no longer sustainable. Stepping away wasn't characterized as defeat, but it felt like one. Acting had been his language, and Parkinson's was progressively rewriting it. Still, Fox wasn't finished. He reappeared in carefully picked roles that allowed him to play without carrying an entire production. His performance on Boston Legal demonstrated a softer, more delicate strength, while his guest appearance on Scrubs demonstrated his ability to combine humor with compulsive intensity. Each job felt intentional, almost surgical, proof that he could still approach audiences without pretending nothing had changed. The trend persisted with Rescue Me, when he gave an unvarnished performance that won him another major prize, and again with The Good Wife, where his portrayal of an intelligent but physically limited lawyer reflected his own reality in ways that were impossible to ignore. Even his self-aware appearances on Curb Your Enthusiasm contained an edge. humor honed by living experience. But beneath the accolades, something else was occurring. Parkinson's disease was no longer limited to movement. Memory lapses began to surface, lines faded away, and communication required more effort than it formerly had. On the set of another production, Fox's understanding came softly when he was unable to recall dialogue he had just read. This time, there was no denial left to hide behind. He knew that if he kept acting, others would have to bear what his body could no longer sustain. Walking away wasn't surrender. It was recognition. Pain descends, and the point at when hope completely crumbled. As Michael J. Fox stepped further away from acting, the physical reality of Parkinson's became impossible to romanticize. The sickness was no longer something he handled between performances. It was now the primary factor affecting his daily life. Pain became persistent, not abstract. His body would occasionally lock in place as scorching feelings spread across his unresponsive muscles. Movement, once his greatest strength, now unpredictable and hazardous. The lowest point came after a fall that resulted in a broken arm. This was more than simply another injury for Fox. It was a psychological rupture. He later stated that this was the first time his famed optimism entirely failed him. There was no silver lining to be found, no lesson to be learned. He doubted everything, including the story he had constructed about resilience. For the first time, he gave himself permission to admit that certain sorrow cannot be transformed into inspiration without violating the truth. What followed was a succession of medical setbacks that further stole away his independence. Doctors identified a benign tumor on his spinal cord that was developing rapidly, increasing his chance of paralysis and affecting his balance. Surgery was unavoidable. The treatment itself was effective, but the aftermath was horrible. As part of his rehabilitation, he had to relearn how to walk, trust his body, and live inside a frame that was unfamiliar to him. Fox spent time in a wheelchair during this time, which greatly disturbed him. He recalled feeling reduced to an object, moved from place to place without agency. Being unable to greet people at eye level, unable to control direction or pace, made him feel invisible. "No one listens to luggage," he wrote, a sentence that encapsulated the emotional deterioration that results from losing autonomy in addition to physical limitations. Even after regaining the ability to walk, the punishment continued. Falls led to fractured bones, infections, and surgeries that removed damaged tissue. Each recovery was followed by another setback, a cycle that strained even his capacity for endurance. Parkinson's had taken more than acting. It had taken music, drawing, dancing, and other creative outlets that once gave him peace. Writing became the only remaining way to express himself, not as escape, but as documentation, the promise, the reality, and a different kind of victory. At the end of his memoir, Lucky Man, Michael J. Fox returned to a moment that once defined his hope for the future. In a Senate hearing in Washington, he testified in support of funding Parkinson's research. Speaking not as a celebrity, but as a patient, betting everything on science. He described the fight against the disease as a winnable war. And with calm certainty, he told lawmakers that one day, in his 50s, he would be dancing at his children's weddings. It wasn't bravado. It was faith. Faith in research, in time, and in the belief that effort would be rewarded. Decades later, the truth is harder to accept. Despite extraordinary fundraising and scientific progress, there is still no cure for Parkinson's disease. Fox did not dance at those weddings. The war he believed could be won remains unresolved, and the timeline he trusted proved painfully optimistic. For many, that would feel like failure. For Fox, it became something else entirely. Rather than turning bitter, he adjusted his understanding of what winning meant. His foundation has raised staggering sums, accelerated clinical trials, and changed how Parkinson's research is funded and coordinated worldwide. More significantly, he altered the way the illness is discussed by refusing to allow Parkinson's to be concealed, sanitized, or reduced to inspirational slogans. By doing this, he gave countless patients visibility and dignity that medicine was unable to provide. As his body has deteriorated, his clarity has improved. Through writing, Fox explored his early years, not out of nostalgia, but rather in search of answers. When he watched old home videos that his father had shot, he realized that his motivation was never about receiving praise. Rather, he performed to amuse himself, to keep moving, and to survive. This realization reframed everything. Parkinson's did not erase who he was. Rather, it revealed who he had always been. Do you think courage is about fighting sickness or about learning how to live honestly with it? Let us know your ideas in the comments. And if this story impacted you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true tales behind the public image.